Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, moni muli wanji, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are so delighted that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Podbean, Podchaser, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. We have a wonderful show for you today, coming from our studios in beautiful Reedville, Massachusetts. Kat Michaels and Rosie Russell are here to talk about their beautiful middle grade novel, Just Between Sam and Me. Before we invite Kat and Rosie into the studio, we want to invite you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. So much for you to do there. Please be sure to check out our newsletter. Also, you can read our blogs. Check out our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read Wall of Fame. You can also find out about our live, in-person, and virtual events. Please check it out today. Also, we'd love to connect with you on social media. So many ways to do that. On Facebook, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids. On Instagram, it's at Reading With Your Kids. And on Twitter, it's at Jedley Magic. So many ways to connect, so many ways to celebrate that you are part of our beautiful Reading With Your Kids family. We have two wonderful guests for you today celebrating their brand new book, Just Between Sam and Me. Please welcome back to the show Rosie Russell and her co-author, Kat Michaels. Rosie, Kat, how are you?
Hey, Jedley, this is Kat from Raleigh. We're super duper today. Thank you.
That's awesome. And Rosie, how are you?
Oh, great. And I'm from Kansas City, Missouri.
That's right. We are really excited. Rosie was here to celebrate two of her books early on in the podcast. One of our first guests in the first few months of the podcast. We certainly have grown since then, 900 or so episodes later. And we're back together again. Rosie and Kat came together to write Just Between Sam and Me. Rosie, why don't we start with you? Can you give us the thumbnail, what Just Between Sam and Me is all about?
Well, it's about a young Midwestern girl, 6th grade, Olivia Martin. She starts 6th grade and without her best friend because her best friend's out on vacation for a day. And then she ends up meeting a new student that enters the situation, and things just get kind of hard after that for Olivia. She loves her horse. She wants to get him into a competition, and she has all these goals. But there's just things that just keep happening to her. So,
you know, 6th grade is an incredibly difficult time in the lives of so many kids, especially young women. Kat, what kind of things happen in the story?
Well, Jed, it's interesting that you asked because many of the incidents were inspired by some things that actually happened to my sweet, shy 4th grade niece. For example, she was socially shunned and made fun of by a group of girls in her classroom. Rosie, can I tell the incident about the malfunction? There was one incident where the girls teased her for a school picture that her bra strap was showing, and she had a meltdown. So we added something similar to that to our story. So tried to add some real-life incidents. And additionally, Rosie and I both at one time worked together in public schools. We were not together in the same place, but we were in the same field. And we observed what a lot of our kids with learning disabilities and emotional disabilities went through, being ostracized by the other kids. So we tried to incorporate some of those feelings into the book, as well as going back to remember how shy and awkward and difficult time it was being in middle school.
Yeah. Rosie, it seems like we've come so far in so many different ways, but in other ways we haven't, as a race, haven't grown at all. The issue of bullying, the issue of excluding kids, that psychological bullying and torment that girls were always really good at, it just seems like it's magnified now with the rise of social media and technology.
Right, and I think that was one thing I noticed the most in 5th and 6th grade girls. It was very difficult for them to transition from being somewhat of a young girl growing into the middle grade years, and it just it's a hard time for kids, but that part never will change. One thing that we probably have to worry a lot about nowadays is the cyberbullying. And as Kat knows, we did not include that in our book because Olivia is in a small town, and she just, she's too busy with internet and social media. But the main girl that comes in her life is not quite so nice about that. So, so cyberbullying doesn't touch, but at the back of the book, we do give readers links to any kind of problems they may have with that. So.
Yeah, Kat, one of the things I recently had an expert on technology and cyberbullying and social media on, and one of the things that she pointed out to me is that a lot of the hurt, the bullying that's going on these days is not explicit. It's not obviously bullying. It can be something as subtle as everybody in the classroom is liking each other's picture on Instagram except for one girl. So no one will like that one girl's picture or post, and that makes the girl feel left out and ostracized. Is that something that your niece experienced?
Well, fortunately, she's not so much on Insta or Facebook yet. She was a little bit young for that. So fortunately, she was not subjected to any cyberbullying, but definitely excluded socially, made fun of, and my niece also has a learning disability. So you add that on top of everything else that she's trying to deal with and transition into middle school. So fortunately, Jed, the teacher picked up on it right away, and the parents picked up on it right away, and they nipped it in the bud. But that doesn't happen in our story because we wanted to draw out the conflict and make it more interesting for kids, and also to demonstrate to them what they shouldn't do if they are bullied in any way, even if it's like everybody in the class gets invited to a party and you are left out. Is to talk about it with someone and take action right away. Talk to a trusted adult or a friend and get it out. In our story, Olivia, who's our main character, doesn't do that, Jed. Mm-hmm. She's ashamed. She wants to handle it herself. She's a 6th grader. So instead, she starts writing in a journal to her cat, Sam. And she pours out all her worries to her cat, which is where the title comes from. She's writing a journal that's just between Sam and me. Wow.
It brings up a memory when my son was in 6th and 7th grade. He was the target of a single bully, and then that kind of branched out. And it was really hard for me to understand because at that time I was traveling around. In fact, I think that was the year I toured the Raleigh area with my anti-bullying show. And so I'm running around the country, telling kids not to bully others and to stand up and to say something. And my son was being targeted, and he wasn't saying anything. And fortunately, there was somebody, a young woman in the 8th grade, saw what was going on, and then came to me and let me know about it. And then when we were able to sit down with my son, we got to the bottom of it, and we were able to intervene. But a lot of kids don't. Rosie, what is did you, when you were writing this book with Kat, did you have in mind that families would be able to co-read this book with their tweens and teens and hopefully have conversations about the characters, which could lead into conversations about themselves and what they can do if they are targeted?
Oh, definitely. We hope that parents and their children will read together. We hope that this will work its way into counselors' offices, schools. It's so important because it really opens up a lot of dialogue on how Olivia kind of hid all these problems, even from her best friend. And so we talk about where's that upstander, where's that person that, like the young lady you mentioned, thank goodness that she did step in. And so we're hoping very much and encouraging everyone to read this together.
Yeah. I'm wondering, how did this collaboration come together? Kat, how did you meet Rosie, and how did both of you decide to collaborate on this book?
It is difficult because we've only met in person one time when Rosie was on vacation at the beach at the Carolina shore. And I drove 2 hours down so we could have lunch together and meet. But it started when we got into writing about, was it 2013, Rosie? And we just sort of met on social media on some kid lit sites, and we started commenting and following each other. Rosie would write something and I would say, oh, I really think that's cool. And we started following each other. We guested with each other on the blogs. And Rosie, do you want to take over the story of how we started this one? You're always so good at that.
Oh, well, it's fun because it all started with an image that Kat put up on her fan page on Facebook. And she said, let's write a story. And a lot of authors do that. They'll, so maybe one will come in and write a sentence, and the next one comes in and follows that sentence. And it's just kind of fun. Well, it kind of just stopped, and I just kept going, and I was so excited. I just kept going and building the town and building this. And so Kat goes, I think you have something there, Rosie. And I said, ooh, okay. So I actually worked on that for a year or more, and I just kind of held on to it. And then I thought, you know what, maybe I'll do something with it. And I'll approach Kat and see, since she started it, I'll ask her if she would like to, continue. And so we had to go through quite a process to get that going, and maybe Kat can tell you about that. But she said yes, and I was so excited.
And a book was born. It took a while, Jedley, because we had to figure out how we're going to work together, how we're going to share files virtually, who's going to write what, who's going to edit what, approval, da-da-da-da-da. And then COVID hit. So COVID hit, and then I just shut down for a couple of weeks. I really did not want to, or could not concentrate on anything except, health, safety, and well-being. And Rosie was so patient with me during that time because my frustration level would just bubble up at sometimes. I just couldn't do anymore. But I think the key to our collaboration has been that we're able to talk to each other and be frank with each other and understand each other. We would start off initially with like monthly calls, daily emails, and that escalates, weekly calls. Rosie, now we're emailing and chatting and talking almost daily during our launch week.
Yeah.
And it's kept us going. So in a way, the focus on this story, some of my feelings of insecurity and such may have been reflected into the story, and I think that made Olivia a stronger character.
Interesting. Rosie, Kat was saying that she was very frustrated, especially when COVID hit. Did you find yourself in a position where you were kind of trying to motivate Kat to stay interested in the project, or just kind of sat back and said, okay, well, if this works, it works. If not, it's not meant to be?
I wasn't worried about it at all. Kat and I just kind of have done that with each other. We are a fine balance, and we give each other our space when we need it. And I knew she needed that, so I just kind of backed off and did what I felt like I could do. And then when she came back, she was rested up and she felt clear in her mind, and it all worked out. So awesome. It was a good balance.
Kat, it's interesting because you said some of the fear and the frustration that you felt from COVID, you wove into Olivia's character. Can you talk about some of those specific parts of traits that we'll find when we read about Olivia?
I think her insecurity, do people like me? Am I doing the right thing? What am I doing wrong now? Why is everybody against me? And yet still there's a sense of optimism and determination. Olivia has tenacity, and she doesn't give up. And she does have a support system through her animals and her best friend. It's just when she steps into that toxic school environment, which is like us stepping into a toxic COVID environment, does she feel inferior. So the story is about her gaining self-confidence and self-esteem to tackle these challenges and eventually come out on the better side.
You know, you just used the phrase toxic environment referring to a school. And I think for many kids, it is absolutely appropriate. When my son was in middle school, his environment was toxic for him. One of the things that we're hearing now, we're recording this in December, in the middle of the pandemic. I'm sure that when this is published, we'll still be dealing with the pandemic. When we're going to be dealing with this for a long time. And in fact, after we're out of lockdown and maybe with the vaccine, or when the virus finally mutates to the point where it's not lethal for a lot of people, the scars we're going to be dealing with the scars that were inflicted by COVID for a long time. But we're hearing so much talk from families that our kids need to get back to school. They need to get back there. That's a place where they really, really thrive. But for a lot of kids, it's not. For a lot of kids, schools are an incredibly toxic environment, and not just from bullying. There are a lot of schools that are incredibly violent, where it's dangerous. I don't know about you, but as two women who were in education, do you think that we've missed an opportunity to really look at our education system and ask questions about the way we've been doing it for the last 100 years? Is it really the best way to go?
I'll go ahead and speak if that's okay. I actually think this is a good time to look at our education system. We have to look at what is right for each child. You know, not every child can sit still in a classroom, can sit still in a chair. It's so you have to individually look at what the children need, and the whole reason they're there. Of course, their social interactions is extremely important, but they're there to learn, and if they can't learn, if there's disruption, they can't learn. So I hope we all just take a real good look at that and kind of decide what's best for the child and the student.
Mm-hmm.
I think one good thing that may have come from this is a new appreciation for people who are in the education field. Mm-hmm. I know so many parents who've taken on trying to work and homeschool, virtual school, and they were saying, we can't do this. How do teachers manage? And I come from a generation of I'm from a generation of educators, three generations of educators. That's what I'm trying to say. And 5 current people in education. And they're struggling with doing the remote teaching. You know, they'll go back to school for a couple of days. There's a COVID issue with some of the children or staff, and then they're back home on virtual learning, and the ping pong is diligence and dedication for all of us.
It is frustrating. My wife, in fact, is right above me right now, teaching her class virtually, and she's a special needs teacher of young kids, and it's incredibly difficult because sometimes she'll have to call the parent and say, "Hey, look, can you help your kid find their book?" Yeah. Because it's there's a mountain of clothes or whatever, and the book's underneath that. And I like the fact that we are talking about education more. I think I don't think we're talking about it enough, though, and asking the right questions. Rosie, you hit on something that I think is incredibly important, and that education, one size absolutely does not fit all. And thankfully, we're at the point where kids with learning difficulties and challenges are getting the specialized education that they need to flourish and to succeed. But there's a lot of kids in the middle that aren't. You know, they're not causing trouble or to the extent where they're really disrupting a classroom. So it's like, oh, Johnny's there and he's kind of fidgety and he's not really learning, but he's getting a C and he's not making us crazy. So that's good. But meanwhile, if Johnny had the right support to support his needs, he could potentially become an A student and really flourish.
I agree with that.
Yeah. What's next for Kat and Rosie? Was this such an incredibly wonderful experience that you want to write more together, or was it, okay, yeah, did that, done that, don't want to do it again?
Go ahead, Rosie.
Go ahead.
I am actually, I like different challenges, Jed, and Rosie knows that I have wanted to write a novel, a feel-good novel for adults. So that's really going to be my next step. But our young readers are telling us that they want a second version of this. So I don't know if Rosie feels like she wants to go ahead solo or not, because she's a great picture book illustrator. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen next.
I have to agree, Kat. I think I've been kind of feeling like we have to kind of decompress from this, last 22 months, I believe. Mm-hmm. We'll kind of take a little break and get our heads clear, and then, the second book may pop in our heads, and we may just go to town with it. Or not. We don't know. We got to really take some time and kind of just celebrate this one.
Yeah,
yep.
Absolutely. Well, I know folks are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about Just Between Sam and Me. And I know both of you have your own presence online. So, Kat, first, where can folks go to find out more about you and your books and Just Between Sam and Me?
If they go to my website, that's probably the best place to get information, which is katmichaelswriter.com.
Awesome. And Rosie, where can folks go to learn more about you?
And my website is www.booksbyrose.com.
We've been speaking to the authors of Just Between Sam and Me, Kat Michaels and Rosie Russell. Kat, Rosie, thanks so much for being part of the show today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be coming to us from Italy. Her name is Delia Ciccarelli. She is the illustrator of The Cuddle Book. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Hey, if you are the author of a fantastic children's book or the illustrator of a fantastic children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the show. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. And it doesn't cost a thing. It's amazing. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on that Authors Click Here button at the top of the page. Scroll on down, and you can find out how easy it is to be a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guests, Kat Michaels, Rosie Russell. Be sure to check out Just Between Sam and Me. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.